Member for Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to start by saying I'll be sharing my time with the member for Sherbrooke, and I'm looking forward to his remarks on it. He's been asking very pointed questions so far, so I'm very interested in what he has to say. Mr. Speaker, since 2007, and you'll know this very well because I know that you were involved in some of the activities that was going on at that time relative to the Witness Protection Program, people from the NDP and perhaps even the Liberals have been calling for the government to expand the eligibility for the witness protection programs to ensure the safety of all Canadians in potential danger because they've taken up their responsible duties as citizens. They've stood up and they've put themselves in jeopardy at some times, and we have this, what I would call a valuable program to help protect them. But we specifically called for better coordination of federal and provincial programs, better overall funding for the program, and that's an area that you'll hear more about further on in my remarks. That call that went out in 2007 for coordination and improvement in coordination was echoed in 2009. It was echoed again in 2012. And notwithstanding the fact that the NDP supports the government's attempt with C-51 to improve the witness protection program, we remain concerned that the Conservative government has not committed any new dollars to the system to support an increase in use. The world has changed, Mr. Speaker, very much in the last 10 years. The situation around street gangs and the young people that caught up in that and trying to get them back out of that very concerning behaviour, and oftentimes it only comes about when they've been put before the justice system and we have the opportunity to use their evidence in court, but they're reluctant to do so unless they have the protection of our government. We're also concerned that the RCMP and local police departments are quite unreasonably being asked to work within their existing budgets. And frankly, clearly that's just unrealistic, Mr. Speaker. You know, it should be obvious that it would clearly impede any substantial increase in the participation in the program. And I understood or believed that that's what part of the purpose was to open the doors wider to the program. But if you don't fund it, how can you accomplish that? You know, we're satisfied with Bill C-51 overall, and that it would extend the period of emergency protection and clear up some of the technical problems that have been brought before both the Liberal government before this and now the current government. But we believe to be effective, C-51 should include provisions for an independent agency to operate the program, and that was recommended, Mr. Speaker, in the Air India inquiry, in the report that came out of that. In fact, we were quite surprised, Mr. Speaker, that it wasn't included in C-51. So as a result, the RCMP will continue to be responsible for the program, and I would leave this point with you, Mr. Speaker, that would leave the RCMP in a conflict of interest in being the agency both investigating the case and then deciding who gets protection. Now, even though I've raised some of Bill C-51's shortcomings and that the Conservatives were late to respond, and we've made that point fairly, and in fairness to them, they're not the only ones who are late. The previous government was quite, I would go so far as to say, even negligent in this. New Democrats are pleased that the government has finally listened to our proposals, and it's been said that within the committee there was a collaborative effort to try to get to the right place on this. But I can't stress enough that the Conservative government, if they truly want to improve the witness protection program, they must also commit the necessary funding. It's required, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that those improvements have a chance of working, especially again in that new area relative to gangs, to street gangs. We cannot put ourselves as a society in the position of saying to the young people, we want to take you out of the gangs, we want to use your evidence in court, but we're going to leave you high and dry afterwards, because we know that some of those gangs can be particularly vicious in how they respond to anybody who stands up and tries to do the right thing. Now, all members of this House, on both sides, are concerned with making our communities safe as possible, and I believe the Witness Protection Program in particular is one of the more important tools in fighting street gangs. And again, I've talked a little bit on that already. I would remind the government members that the Federal Witness Protection Program has long been criticized because of its very narrow eligibility criteria. And again, I know that the Speaker and others were ones who had raised those concerns previously. There have been continuing complaints of poor coordination with provincial programs and of the low number of witnesses who, Mr. Speaker, actually get to access that program. In 2012, only 30 out of 108 applications considered were actually accepted. And I would suggest that that very much undermines this program's value. So we've got 78 people who are witnesses, who put themselves at risk, who didn't get the follow-up protection that at least was believed to be their right, it was believed to be worthy of at least applying for, and to my mind, that is very concerning. Now, changes to the Witness Protection Program have been called for by the NDP since its very inception in 1996. There were glaring omissions in this. Now, first, majority Liberal governments and subsequently this government to date have done little. Now, I must add to that the proviso that with C-51 they've made a move, and they made some fairly reasonable moves. That there's been few bills, though, over that long period of time that actually got introduced into this House. One being way back in 1999, that was Bill C-223, regarding witness protection during domestic violence cases. And I would add, because it's quite often said in this place that the NDP doesn't support the government's bills on crime bills, I would say that back in 1999, we supported that bill for protection for people in domestic violence cases. The overarching issues of eligibility, of coordination, and funding still have not been significantly addressed, Mr. Speaker. And the NDP is on record, as I've said, for repeatedly asking the government to address these three key issues. The previous Speaker spoke to that to some degree. They must expand the criteria even for eligibility even further, and the cooperation that has been criticized between the province and the federal government has to be addressed. And the underpinning of the whole process, of course, like every other government program, is based on the funding. And if that funding does not increase, it's not going to be effective. 2012, the member for Trinity Spadina called for more support for the Federal Witness Protection Program. That member pointed to the difficulty Toronto police were having trying to convince witnesses to the summer's mass shooting that we all heard about at a block party in Danzig Street to come forward. I would reiterate that some aspects of this bill we do support, and that's the bill overall as well, because of those aspects that we support. It's not as comprehensive, it doesn't go as far as we would like, but it is a reasonable effort, and I'll acknowledge that. We are pleased that this bill modestly, and I stress the word modestly, expands the eligibility. And that was at the direct request of the RCMP. And I'm quite satisfied that the government, when you get advice from organizations like the RCMP, that you give credence to it. And but again, back one more time to street gangs. You know, it is good that street gangs were included in this. It's, you know, it's a new group of people that's giving assistance to us. We don't think in terms of street gangs as giving assistance, but within it, there's some young people who have made mistakes, and they recognize those mistakes. They've stood up, and they've tried to make amends in their own way, so we do need to support that. Federal departments and agencies with a mandate relating to national security, national defense, or public safety will now be able to refer witnesses to the program. I'm curious about the word refer witnesses to the program. I would like to see a stronger word like recommend them to the program. Hopefully, we're opening the door for a sustained use of that program that will be of value in that particular area of national security. I mentioned earlier the emergency protection and the clear up of some technical problems of coordinating with the provinces. Emergency protection, we are talking about situations where we're saying people must give evidence in support of a case that's going to help the courts deal with very negative situations of violence. And emergency coverage for those people is really, really essential. And I would say, Mr. Speaker, I see you're giving me the 1-minute signal, so I will wrap up. I have much more to say, but this time I'll leave it to the next speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.